Hey folks, I'm here with my friend, writer and cartoonist Liza Donnelly to explore new ways we can talk about important moments in American history. Hey Liza, how you doing?
Hi, Heather. I'm great.
The first one we chose was the Voting Rights Act, which will be 60 years old on August 6th. By 1960, in a town like Selma, Alabama, which was a majority Black town, the voting rolls were 99% white. But coming out of World War II, a lot of Americans looked at the fact they had fought against fascism in Europe in order to defend democracy and thought they should bring democracy to the United States. Black and brown Americans began to push for the right to vote. President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who had commanded soldiers in World War II, backed them. He helped to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1957 with the hope that it would protect voting. It didn't do as much as the country needed, but under it, Black people began to register to vote. In 1963, Black organizers in Selma began to organize voting registration drives. In 1964, with the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, after the murder of 3 civil rights workers who were registering people to vote in Mississippi, people in Selma took their right to vote out for a test drive. In Selma, County Sheriff James Clark met those efforts by arresting almost 2,000 people. And then, when a federal court told him not to interfere with orderly registration by imposing literacy tests on people who were trying to register to vote, not a single person passed. The pressure continued until in February of 1965, police officers shot and killed a 26-year-old who was marching for the right to vote in Alabama, a man named Jamie Lee Jackson. Black leaders planned a 54-mile march from Selma to the state capitol at Montgomery to call attention to the murder and to emphasize the fact they were being kept from registering to vote. On Sunday, March 7th, they set off across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Police officers met them with horses and billy clubs and beat them. They fractured the skull of one young marcher named John Lewis. On the heels of what we know as Bloody Sunday, President Lyndon Baines Johnson called for all Americans to get behind the right to vote. He said, "Their cause must be our cause too. All of us must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice." LBJ proposed legislation specifically to protect the right to vote. He said, "This right to vote is the basic right without which all others are meaningless. It gives people control over their destinies." Congress agreed. LBJ signed the Voting Rights Act into law on August 6, 1965. By 2012, there was no longer a racial gap in voter turnout in Alabama. Then in 2013, the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act in the Shelby County versus Holder decision. The court said that the requirement of the Voting Rights Act that states that it had a history of voter suppression had to pre-clear any changes in the voting laws with the Department of Justice no longer reflected current conditions in the United States and was unconstitutional. Immediately, states began to restrict the right to vote. Then in 2021, in the Brnovich decision, the Supreme Court declared that laws that disproportionately affect minorities are not discriminatory so long as they were not intended to be racially discriminatory. The right to vote that was protected in the Voting Rights Act of 1965 continues to be under siege, but people are fighting back. As recently as July 29, 2025, Democrats reintroduced to Congress the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act to protect the right to vote. The measure is named after the man whose skull police fractured on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in 1965.